Welcome to the Everyday PM podcast, the podcast where we discuss project management principles for your everyday life. My name is Campea, and I'm a certified project manager. I've been in this business for quite some time, working in different industries, including healthcare, tech, marketing, operations, you name it. I'm so excited to welcome Julianna Newland, who is a retiree and author of a book called All Up in Your Business, Managing Your Business Crap. Julianna, I'm so excited to welcome you to this very special episode of the Everyday PM podcast. For those who have not met you yet, please take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here with you. A little bit of my background, as mentioned, I am a retiree. I was in the workforce for about 34 years here in Indianapolis. I spent 24 of them for working in management with a Fortune 500 company. And that was a job that I really enjoyed. It was very rigorous, but I survived, and I decided then to retire. And then I got really bored and decided to go back to work. So I had to go back into the employment opportunity pool and try to apply for another job. And I switched over to the nonprofit sector, and I had a couple jobs in those arenas, and then I retired for good, and I wrote a book.
That's amazing. Just living the dream in many ways. But I think, Julianna, I think what presented itself as the topic that we're going to cover, which who knows, when it comes to the Everyday PM podcast, sometimes we get into a topic and it kind of divulges into something else, right? But you were the first woman to step into a public affairs management role that was heavily all male cohort. It was all male, right? Until you stepped in.
Yes.
And so to me, that topic was the most attractive in terms of all of the different various things that you've highlighted as part of your introduction, as well as some of the other topics that we had tossed around doing. But I think this one is just so relevant in this space of, women empowerment. And I facilitate this podcast to really elevate those voices as well. And I think it's really important for our up and coming project managers and even just people who are looking to pave their way as a career woman to understand your journey and how you made that work. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience, in particular, maybe some of the challenges you faced as being the only woman in that cohort?
Sure. I think that, or at least I felt that I was a social experiment for the company that I was working for, the Fortune 500 company. And you're right, it was all men on my team. And there were, at that time, I think 8 men. More were added as time went along. And it was maybe 4 or 5 years before another woman was added to the team. So I didn't really have a female peer to interact with on my team, but I had a lot of good support from my vice president and my executive director, who really helped to see my goals and be able to manage my projects well. How I felt and what I saw during the time, just remember, this was back in the 1990s. So that was a while ago, and there was definitely a glass ceiling and a sticky floor, which is a term I saw in a Harvard study, which talked about the glass ceiling and the sticky floor, which is women oftentimes in the workforce are stuck on the floor. They can't even elevate to get to a glass ceiling. And that's quite a problem. And in looking for possible peers at a higher level, there was another study that was done by Standard & Poor's, I think, if I remember correctly, and it said that there are fewer women in the executive suite of companies now than there was 2 decades ago.
Wow.
So that's a big gap that has occurred over the last 20 years. And I think that while I observed most of my interactions with people in my job working with the people at the company, they did like, what is it you do? And you, a woman, are doing, they didn't say a woman that, but you're doing this? Yes, indeed. So it was a challenge to get support from across the board with the different managers at the company. But once I settled in, I think they were all very supportive.
And it sounds like the way that you described it, you came in with that perspective of, is this kind of just a science experiment, or however you said it, right? Is this just a pilot study to see how a woman would engage in this type of cohort structure where you are surrounded by all males? Did you have any apprehensions in taking this role? And or did you come in with that intent of, you know what, I'm going to take this role. It's going to come with those stereotypes and then those barriers that women would face in this challenge. And did you take that on as a challenge or see that as an opportunity?
I took it on as a challenge and molded it into an opportunity. In the job I had before this, when I worked for state government and a nonprofit, I witnessed the glass ceiling and the sexism that occurred in those two jobs. And so I knew going in, working for a Fortune 500 company, that there was a strong male matrix and not a lot of women that I could look to for peers. And something that really helped me though was to have a mentor, or I had mentors. I had some male mentors and I had some female mentors, and that made a big difference. That really helped me a lot. And I encourage, when I'm talking to younger women about job opportunities, I encourage them as soon as they get settled in to try to find a mentor who can help with a lot of things, and it's extremely valuable.
Absolutely, Juliana. And I think, just to tie this into the project management audience that may be listening to this, if you are not aware of that gender inequality that exists within
Mhm.
project management, everything Juliana is pointing out are all of the things that you would want to also engage in to help yourself in your career, especially if you're a woman trying to be a PM. I believe the current ratio of male to females in project management in the US is about 2/3 to 1/3. So 2/3
Wow.
male, 1/3 female. So in
Wow.
many respects, your journey is really what paved the way for the women who are trying to navigate, even not even at the executive level, just kind of
Mhm.
coming into that space where even in the project management industry, you're seeing such a wide variance between the two genders.
Yeah, that's maybe the example of the sticky floor in
Mm-hmm.
that sector there, where the 2/3, 1/3, and the women are not given the opportunities. They're not. What I have seen happen is that they don't get appointed to or asked to head up team projects where they can work with other members of their department, or more importantly, interdepartmentally. So they don't really get a chance to show what they've got, and they
Yeah.
don't get a chance to show those leadership skills, which would help them to get promoted. And I think women are overlooked for these opportunities to lead projects, and that's very unfortunate.
Let's talk a little bit about, agreed. Let's talk a little bit about, you said a mentor. You had several mentors, male and female. What was
Mhm.
your interaction with them? How did you even acquire mentorship? Was it made available to you, or did you have to seek that out? And what was your interaction with them? How did you utilize them, and how did you find that beneficial in navigating this?
Initially, I had to seek them out, and what I did was I kept my eyes and ears open for someone at a higher level than I was. Who this would be a director level, who I had a chance to work with on projects that I thought would be a good mentor for me. And I just point blank, the first one was a female, and I just asked her. I said, "I'm looking for a mentor. You're a director, and I would like to learn from you. You've been with the company for several years. You're obviously well respected. Can you help guide me, because I'm a female in a male dominated department." And she was very helpful. We'd meet for coffee, and just I would talk through some issues or challenges that I had, and she always had good advice. And I made sure to send her follow-up notes, thank you notes, to thank her for her time, because it takes a lot of time for the mentor, if they're doing a good job at it, to really help their mentee, I guess you say,
Mhm.
with their responsibilities. So later on, the company formally instituted a mentorship program, and
Oh,
they
good.
they were able to have vice presidents and directors volunteer to be directors and then to be mentors, I mean, and so that list was provided to all the management teams so they could find someone who they knew would already be interested in this.
So how was that feeling of I don't know how much of your mentorship and journey influenced that to come to fruition for your organization, but what was your feeling around them kind of coming and saying, we're going to back this type of program so that people don't feel like they're isolated in their professional journeys?
That's a very good question. I think there were a lot of people that were in similar situations to me that were sort of struggling initially. And the company was aware when they look around the table that, gee, there's a lot of men here and not many women. And what's the one thing that we could do to help this situation? And the company did employee focus feedback sessions, and that came up time and time again as the need for mentors for especially the female employees.
That's really great. It's interesting, and Juliana and I are only just meeting, so I'll say this. I'm in a doctorate program where my dissertation is really focused on women in a certain space, kind of related to the topic that we're covering. And I'm glad that you bring up this actual real experience around how the value of mentorship and having people back and support you in that way. So I do
Yes.
think that is a critical factor in what
Oh,
I'm looking at.
absolutely. I have a list of 3 things that women can do, and that's definitely in the top 3.
Oh yeah, well let's divulge what the other two are if you're willing
The
to
first
share.
is to advocate for yourself. And
Okay.
I think you cannot assume that even your boss or other managers in your department are keenly aware of your
Mhm.
value that you provide to the company and your efforts and how you are a team player and all those things. So you really have to advocate for yourself and use metrics, outcome measures when you do this, and communicate these things to your boss, your supervisor, and also ask other managers who have had the chance to interact with you if they would say something to your manager or your supervisor about the quality of the work that you brought to the team and to the project. So
Right.
that's number one. And while you're at it, try to advocate for other women
Yeah.
too, while you're in the position you are in. And then mentorship is number 2. And then third is, I know I mentioned this briefly, but try to identify or even create projects where you can lead. You could be the lead of the team and set out your metrics ahead of time and be there to lead the efforts of the team and then report those efforts and opportunities and good points, valuable projects to the leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. All very good pieces of advice. I hope the audience is listening to those 3 points. I know that at many parts of my career, I also engaged in some of those strategies as well, and they were very helpful. I
Mhm.
remember the first time somebody told me that they didn't know who I was, whereas I had already formed this perception that everyone should know who I am because I manage X, Y, and Z projects, right? So that was foolish of me early on in my career to make that assumption. And so I love the fact that you say advocate for yourself. Really, really do be your first and strongest advocate. And then I'm sure your mentors kind of came in and helped kind of build that
Absolutely.
up a little bit more too.
Absolutely.
Would you say the creation or even just stepping back to the focus groups that then led to the mentorship and leadership programs that your organization created at the time, was that the symbolic moment of you saying, okay, I think we are finally starting to chip away at this glass ceiling, or was there something else that had happened?
That was the key. That was a key. That was a major point that everyone could see that they were chipping away at the glass ceiling. But the other thing is what the Standard Poor's research found out, there's just are fewer women in the executive suite. So if you want to move up the ladder and you're stuck at the manager level and don't really have an opportunity for further promotion, that seems to be a problem. And I think that was something that I would always bring up in my discussions with my supervisor and with my mentor and say, well, can you do something at your level to help address this? Because it is a concern to the management level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. I'm curious about when you're in the role, and I think I'm assuming you've spent several years in that leadership role.
24.
24 years. Okay, thank you. Perfect. What was kind of the beginning of that journey, stepping into that space and your level of influence there versus kind of how you left it before you decided to retire? What did that look like? Was there any compare and contrast that you can share with us?
That's a great question. When I started, to be quite frank with you, in the first 3 months, I was petrified. I was scared that I would make a lot of mistakes and I would get fired and
Yeah.
all these things. And I almost quit after about 3 months. And then my husband talked to me and he said, you stick it out a little longer, you'll be fine, you'll settle in, give it 6 months. So I gave it 6 months and I settled right in and was able to move through with the projects and assignments and get some attention to what I was doing and get support from my mentor, etc. When I left the company, it was basically the same. I was doing the same thing that I had been doing for 24 years. So there wasn't a big change. I was just tired. I was just really tired and I
Yeah.
wanted to retire. And so I did. But my job was basically the same job for 24 years, but I had a lot of different projects. There's some that I could create myself where I saw a gap and I would go to the vice president and say, I think we should do a program in XYZ. And
Mhm.
here's the outline of it. And here's how I think it would run. And he was very supportive of these ideas and would say, go with it. So I went with it.
Yeah, that's really great. I think sometimes organizations, and this is my assumption, probably not even, I don't know what kind of data I could have to support this, but maybe sometimes organizations just don't realize that they are stacking themselves in that way. And especially during that time that you described, where this is well in advance of any kind of DEI and I movements or any kind of women equality movements in terms of getting people like us in those types of leadership roles. So would you say maybe the organization didn't intend to create a male cohort, but they just ended up with that because it was the traditional way of thinking about putting together an executive team, or were there some influences happening outside of that
I
assumption?
think it's a combination of things. I think, first of all, there's a good old boys club
Yeah.
that is still in existence at many, especially larger companies. And it's less so than it was when I first started back in the 1990s, but it still exists. And Harvard did a study, that study that I talked about before, and the core of it was, is there still a good old boys club at
Mhm.
your workplace? And in doing their interviews with the employees, even in management, they found that that was exactly the case. And I think it's almost tribalism. I think that,
Yeah.
no disrespect to men, but they want to work with other men. And I think it's because they're, the football team and the basketball team, they all
Sure.
sit together at lunch and they're just used to working with other males and that's what they prefer to do. It may be sort of subconscious that they don't realize they're doing it and what harm it is causing to women, because
Mhm.
oftentimes men will promote other men even though the woman on the team is doing equal work, and they just automatically, I think I don't know what it is, but they just don't think about the consequences of not promoting women,
Yeah.
especially when they're doing an equal job with the
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. And kind of piggybacking off of that, and my studies have been specific to project management and in particular women in construction, but there are several studies that say, for those that are listening, why is this important? Why is breaking the glass ceiling important? There are several studies that have actually resulted in saying that women in these types of roles are going to help from some sort of return in investment, right? Maybe it's not
Exactly.
monetary, maybe it comes in the value of diversity in thought, innovation, the creativity you can gain by having a good mix of
Yes.
men and women in these cohorts. And so if that is resonating with you, Juliana, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. But I do want to emphasize to the audience who's not very, if you're not very familiar with this concept of breaking the glass ceiling, this is the reason why all of the work that Juliana has done, paving the way in her journey, is important to this concept. And I think there are several studies that have further emphasized the need for this diversity because of those results that you would get.
Yes. I think that as younger women come into the workforce, hopefully they have not encountered a degree of patronization, or what's the right word? That the men, I sound like I'm anti-male, and I'm not. I have
Yeah,
male
no,
friends, but women add a lot of, they, first of all, they're better communicators. They're better, they're more detail oriented. And I think that they also are more team oriented. So those are the three key attributes that they would bring to a department or a team. And it's the loss of the director if they don't see that and don't put women in these roles. Not they deserve to be in those roles, I guess is what I want to say. It's
yeah,
not a special kind of thing that they're doing to show their non whatever. Anyway,
yeah.
they are doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and for all those reasons you and I have listed off, I think it's just there's just so much value in
Uh-huh.
bringing equality to that space. So you touched on it a little bit, and then if it's okay with you, I do want to hear just a little bit about your book as well. But what advice would you give to women who are entering, they want to pursue, either they're starting their careers or maybe they are kind of maybe where I'm at, where you really just want to pave the way for the next level for yourself. But what advice would you give us to ensure that we can secure that spot?
I would go back to my 3 points I made earlier. Advocate, advocate, advocate for yourself. And don't assume that your manager knows all this or the other manager knows what you're doing. You have to advocate for yourself. Mentor, listen to your mentor, and use your mentor in a very constructive way so that they can help guide you through the channels and through the snares and help you to get elevated. And then the third is to just, as I think you've mentioned this and I've done this, which is to find the projects,
Mhm.
create them. Or if there already is a standing project, get yourself in the seat where you can lead the team.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think just hearing that from a woman who has experienced it will resonate, I think, a lot better than just kind of reading it in an article or a blog post or something like that. So thank you, Juliana.
Oh, you're welcome.
I love the title of your book. I actually I didn't know it until you mentioned it as part of your introduction. So tell us a little, just a little bit. Obviously, we didn't intend for this conversation to focus on it, but you are the author of All Up in Your Business, Managing Your Business Crap. So what is it about?
Well, but it's a collection of my observations of men and women in the workplace and how they interact or act with certain programs or processes. And over the years, I've seen a lot of these things that I've included in the book, such as the glass ceiling and the good old boy network. And I have found that a lot of it is it's either once you want to laugh or you cry so hard that you wish you could laugh. But it's very sarcastic. It's very tongue in cheek, but I provide advice, good advice at the end of each of the sections. And also what's interesting is I asked two bartender friends of mine to create some craft cocktail recipes that I could put in the book. It's sort of as little dividers.
That's
And so
fantastic.
those are in the book, and they're original to these two men. And
Amazing.
so that's a fun little part, but it's an enjoyable book. It's a very short book, and it is witty, and it's very much tongue in cheek. So I say that in my introduction, so people know going in that it is tongue in cheek, but I do offer advice as well.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm looking forward to picking it up. Where can we find it?
Amazon.com or
Oh,
barnesandnoble.com.
perfect. I was hoping you would say Amazon because I am very savvy with that. So, Julianna, thank you so much for sharing with us your journey. I think all of this has been so relevant for not just for the women who are listening, but for all of us who are trying to navigate our own careers and really understanding what other folks' journeys look like, what you've had to endure to get there. But ultimately, now you're in this space where you're retired and you're an author and doing, I'm sure, all of those things that you were looking forward to doing in your other phase of your life now being a retiree. So Julianna, I really do appreciate you coming on to the Everyday PM podcast. If folks want to engage with you further, is there a place that they can do so?
Actually, I will just leave my email because I do follow my email and don't get too far
Fantastic.
behind. But that right now, that's the best way to get a hold of me. Is NEWLAND home and then the numeral 1 @gmail.com. And I'll be
Awesome.
sure to answer them.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that that is specified in
Oh,
the
thank you.
context of the posting as well so that folks can engage with
Thank
you if
you.
they'd like to. And thank you so much again for your time.
Oh, you're very welcome. I
That
enjoyed it very much.
Me too. And that will do it for both of us on the Everyday PM podcast. Julianna, thank you again. And then if you guys want to engage with me, you can find me on LinkedIn by @Campea. And I look forward to hearing from our audience. I know it's been a while, so I'm looking forward to doing a few more of these episodes for you this year. And that will do it for us. Thank you so
Thank you.
much and take care.
You're welcome. You take care too.